Hey everybody, it's Joel Williams and Chase Elleby from Williams Elleby. Today we want to talk to you about a question we get a lot, and that is, do I even have a personal injury case? So it's not a simple yes or no answer. Like most things in the law are not a simple yes or no.
Right.
So there's a few things to consider, but let's start with what is a personal injury case?
Right, so you have to have an injury, right? And someone or something or some person has to be responsible for that injury. So that's what a personal injury case is at the most basic level, right? So if anytime someone calls and asks, always ask, okay, well, what's the injury? And tell me a little bit about what happened, right? The most common thing is a car wreck or a slip and fall. But those are the two things you need. An injury, and someone else or some other company or something has to be responsible for that injury.
Yep. And if you're not hurt, you don't have an injury case.
Right, there's no injury.
It's as simple as that. But case is a word that's used, I think, loosely sometimes. So there's actually, usually when somebody's calling us, they're asking, they may say case, but what they really mean is, can I bring a claim?
Right.
And we refer to claims as things that are brought against the at-fault person or brought to their insurance company prior to filing a lawsuit. It's an injury claim where we're not in formal litigation, no lawsuit's been filed. We're presenting the other person with all the evidence they need to determine that they should pay X amount of dollars to you, right? So that's the claim. Now, it can transition and sometimes does transition over into a case once formal litigation's been filed. So if you have to file a lawsuit, at that point, that's when we refer to having a case.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I say. Front end is the claim, meaning on the front end of any overall case, and then on the back end, as I call it, it's when you actually file the lawsuit or litigation. Another thing, that people automatically think is like, well, once you file the lawsuit, we're going to court. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. Usually once you file a lawsuit, most of the time the case gets resolved without actually having to go to court or going to the jury trial. So when people say court, that's usually what they think of is going to court and you got 12 people sitting there going to decide your case. But like I said, most of the time cases get resolved once you file the lawsuit without having to go to court.
Yep. And there's several different types of personal injury claims or cases. Mm-hmm. Probably like Chase said, the most common is a motor vehicle accident. It can be a tractor trailer, motorcycle, regular passenger car, whatever. Fall cases, there's professional negligence cases like medical malpractice is probably the one that results in personal injuries the most. And even within those subcategories of claims or cases, some tend to settle easier than others. Mm-hmm. For example, medical malpractice cases can, but very rarely do settle without filing a lawsuit, whereas car wreck cases settle without filing a lawsuit all the time.
Yeah, and there could be cases within cases, or claims within claims, rather. Like in a car wreck case, you could have the negligence of the at-fault driver, but you could also have a products liability case, say for the seatbelt not working or the roof being too fragile. So you could have multiple angles in a case as well.
That's right. So really what I think if we're trying to determine, do I have a personal injury claim or do I have a personal injury case, the real question that needs to be asked is, could I bring a personal injury claim or personal injury case successfully?
Right.
And there's a few things that you need to be able to prove as the injured person in order to have success with the claim. The first is the person who hurt you, the other person, negligent?
Right. Yeah.
And also, were you negligent?
Right.
So we call that contributory or comparative negligence in legal terms. But if somebody else didn't make a mistake or intentionally hurt you or should be responsible for the wreck, then you can't recover. But if Chase runs a red light and runs into me, and it was totally not my fault, then the chances are I can successfully bring a claim. But it's not just proving the other person's fault. There's something else you have to prove.
You got to prove that fault or that action caused the injury.
Yeah.
Right? So common thing we see, let's talk about like a rear end collision, right? And you get rear-ended and your back starts to hurt and then you get treatment, you need back surgery. Well, a common defense is that, well, we might have hit you, it might have been our fault, but we didn't cause your back injury or we didn't cause it to the extent that required that surgery. So you got to prove that whatever the action was, whatever the fault, whatever the injury was, or the negligence rather, caused the injury that you're claiming.
Yeah, and most of the time, those defenses that Chase is talking about, they revolve around, did you have some pre-existing issue going on? So did you have arthritis in that part of your body? Did you have a prior injury to that part of your body that was already causing you pain? Sometimes we don't see this quite as often, but it can happen where it's a subsequent injury. So you hurt your back in a car wreck, and then 6 months later you get hit again and hurt the same area of your body. Then you're going to have those causation issues that Chase was talking about. So you got to prove the other person's fault. You got to prove that negligent act or that intentional act caused your injuries. And then you got to prove what the injuries are and what you should be compensated for those injuries.
Yeah, your damages. Right. And it's typically your medical bills. Right. How much did it cost to go to the emergency room? How much did it cost for that surgery? Lost wages if you have to miss time from work, future medical expenses. And then you also have to determine, what's the pain and suffering. In Georgia, the pain and suffering is the enlightened conscience of whatever a jury decides it is, which can really be any number, but there's certain things you look at to sort of justify whatever it is you might ask a jury for when it comes to pain and suffering.
Yeah, and it can get complicated, but to make it real simple on what you ask a jury for, the more severe the suffering is and the longer that somebody suffers, the more likely you are to succeed in asking for a larger number. But if the pain is not that bad and the suffering is not that long, then a smaller number obviously would be appropriate. Another thing to consider is, do you have time to file a claim? Because every now and then we'll get a call from somebody who was in a wreck 3 years ago. Well, in the state of Georgia, except with some very obscure legal exceptions, the answer is probably no. Right, you have 2 years in the state of Georgia to file most personal injury cases. Sometimes you only have a year to file the personal injury case. I know in other states like Tennessee, you only have 1 year to bring that claim. But you have to ask the question, has the clock run out? Do I still have time to file a claim?
Yeah, and that brings me to my last point. It's always important that if you think you might have a personal injury case, always consult a lawyer sooner rather than later. We've seen situations where insurance companies have dragged out claims with pro se, meaning people that aren't represented, literally right up to when the statute of limitations would run, and that's by design. And then once the statute of limitations runs, the person's trying to get in touch with the insurance company and they're getting crickets because the insurance company knows that, hey, we were successful in dragging this out. You can no longer bring a claim. So now you're, basically SOL, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So long story short, if you don't hear anything else in this video, just pay attention to this. And that is if you are asking the question, do I have a personal injury claim? The sooner you can talk to a lawyer, a credible lawyer that lives in the state that you live in or in the state where you would bring the claim, get in touch with them, set up the consultation. Most personal injury attorneys will consult with you for free and will be able to tell you whether in your particular circumstance you have a viable personal injury claim. Yep. So get in touch with that lawyer as soon as possible and they can let you know. But we've just tried to go over some general things to consider. But if this video has been helpful to you in thinking about the things you should consider, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.